Sunday morning, June 27th, 2010, 6:47 a.m. FBI Special Agent Ed Foley watches through binoculars from an unmarked surveillance van parked 3 houses down on Marquette Road in Montclair, New Jersey. The target's kitchen window, second floor of the beige colonial house at number 31. The woman inside moves through her morning routine, pours coffee into a ceramic mug, checks her phone, walks her dog past the tulips she planted last spring. She doesn't see the 47 agents surrounding the neighborhood, doesn't know her Honda is flagged for immediate seizure, doesn't know that upstairs in her daughter's bedroom, FBI technicians already bypassed the alarm system 3 hours ago. Doesn't know she has exactly 13 minutes of freedom remaining. Foley speaks into his radio. All units stand by. The arrest warrant is signed. The evidence is overwhelming. 10 years of surveillance about to culminate in the next 60 seconds. He's watched this woman, known to neighbors as Cynthia Murphy, raise 2 daughters in this quiet suburban street, watched her earn an MBA from Columbia University, watched her work as a financial consultant earning $135,000 annually, watched her attend neighborhood block parties and water her hydrangeas every Sunday. He's also watched her send encrypted messages to Moscow Center using invisible ink and steganography software. Watched her cultivate relationships with venture capitalists who advised presidential campaigns. Watched her receive cash payments totaling over $7 million from the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. The net closes. Foley gives the signal. Go. FBI agents emerge from unmarked vehicles. They wear tactical vests with bright yellow letters spelling FBI across the chest. They move quickly toward 31 Marquette Road. The woman who calls herself Cynthia Murphy steps onto her front porch. She freezes. Her husband Richard stands in the doorway behind her, his face blank with confusion. Their daughters Kate and Lisa, aged 11 and 9, watch from an upstairs window. The agents announce themselves. Federal Bureau of Investigation, you are under arrest. The handcuffs click into place. In that moment, the longest-running Russian espionage operation on American soil since the Cold War begins to unravel. At exactly the same time, 6:47 a.m., coordinated arrests unfold across 4 states. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, FBI agents surround a townhouse on Trowbridge Street. In Yonkers, New York, tactical teams close in on a residential street. In Arlington, Virginia, agents prepare to breach an apartment door. In Manhattan, surveillance units track a red-haired woman as she walks toward a coffee shop on Greenwich Street. This is Operation Ghost Stories, the code name the FBI gave to the most sophisticated counterintelligence investigation in modern American history. For more than 10 years, federal agents watched, listened, and documented as 10 Russian intelligence officers lived as ordinary Americans. They raised children. They attended Ivy League universities. They worked real jobs, paid real taxes, lived in real houses with real mortgages, and all the while they spied for Moscow. But how did the FBI discover them? What small detail triggered an investigation that would expose an entire network of Russian sleeper agents? The answer lies in something so simple, so ordinary, that it almost seems impossible. A laptop computer used at the wrong coffee shop, at the wrong time, on the wrong wireless network. The investigation that would become Operation Ghost Stories actually began much earlier than anyone knew. The roots trace back to May 2004, when FBI counterintelligence agents photographed a man named Christopher Metsos receiving a shopping bag full of cash from a Russian official outside the Russian mission to the United Nations in Manhattan. The agents followed standard surveillance protocols that day. 3 rotating vehicle teams maintained visual contact. 2 fixed observation posts recorded every movement with long-range cameras. Technical specialists monitored electronic communications under authority granted by a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrant. They watched Metsos drive north from Manhattan into Westchester County. They watched him pull into a rest stop near Wurtsboro, New York. They watched him walk into the woods carrying a small shovel. They watched him dig a hole and bury something wrapped in plastic. Then they watched him drive away. The FBI installed motion-activated cameras in the woods. Then they waited. They waited for 2 years. In June 2006, a couple appeared at that rest stop. The man got out of the car and walked into the woods. The cameras recorded everything. He went straight to the burial spot. He dug up the package. Inside was $40,000 in cash and a flash drive containing encrypted instructions from Moscow Center. The man who retrieved the money used the name Michael Zottoli. His companion called herself Patricia Mills. They lived in Seattle and appeared to be a normal married couple with 2 young children. The FBI now had the first thread of a much larger operation. Forensic accountants began tracking the money. Computer specialists analyzed the flash drive. Surveillance teams began following Zottoli and Mills. And slowly, methodically, the FBI started identifying other members of the network. What they discovered was staggering in its scope and ambition. This wasn't a handful of agents working independently. This was a coordinated program run by the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, known by its Russian abbreviation SVR. The operation had a formal name within Russian intelligence, the Illegals Program. The term illegal in espionage terminology means an intelligence officer operating under deep cover with a false identity and no diplomatic immunity. These weren't Russian. Diplomats with official cover who could claim diplomatic immunity if caught. These were men and women who had erased their real identities and built entirely new lives as Americans. If caught, they would face American criminal prosecution with no protection from their government. The FBI identified 4 couples living in different cities. Each couple had been carefully paired together in Russia before being deployed to the United States. They lived together, worked together, had children together, all while maintaining their cover as ordinary American families. Richard and Cynthia Murphy in Montclair, New Jersey. Their real names were Vladimir and Lydia Guryev. Vladimir used a false birth certificate claiming he was born in Philadelphia. Lydia said she was born in New York City as Cynthia A. Hopkins. They arrived in the United States in the mid-1990s, first living in an apartment in Hoboken before purchasing their Montclair home for $481,000 in 2008. Moscow Center paid for the house. Lydia attended New York University, earning 2 undergraduate degrees before getting her MBA from Columbia Business School. By 2009, she worked as vice president at Morea Financial Services in Manhattan, earning a salary that seemed perfectly legitimate. Her professional network included venture capitalist Alan Patrikoff, who co-chaired Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential bid. Her handlers in Moscow instructed her to try to build up relations little by little with such high-level contacts. She tried to obtain details about the global gold market. She cultivated relationships in New York City financial circles specifically to gather intelligence that would be valuable to Russian economists. Donald Heathfield and Tracy Foley in Cambridge, Massachusetts, just blocks from Harvard University. Their real names were Andrei Bezrukov and Elena Vavilova. Bezrukov was born in Kansk, Krasnoyarsk Krai on August 30, 1960. He studied at Tomsk State University from 1978 to 1983 with a degree in history. His cover identity claimed he was the son of a Canadian diplomat who actually died in 1962 at the age of 7 weeks. Bezrukov stole that dead child's identity. From 1992 to 1995, he attended York University in Canada, graduating with a bachelor's degree in international economics. From 1995 to 1997, he studied at the École nationale des ponts et chaussées in France, receiving a master's degree in international business. Then in 2000, he graduated from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University with a master's degree in public administration. His credentials were impeccable. His network was extraordinary. He worked as a partner at Global Partners, Inc., whose clients included Alstom, Boston Scientific, General Electric, and T-Mobile. From 2006 onward, he headed his own consulting company called FutureMap, specializing in government and corporate strategic forecasting. He maintained relationships with Leon Feuerth, former National Security Advisor to Vice President Al Gore. He networked with professors at George Washington University. He attended meetings at federal agencies and think tanks and the World Future Society. His wife, Elena, using the name Tracy Foley, worked as a real estate agent for Redfin in Somerville, Massachusetts. Her former employer described her as one of the hardest working and most competent agents he'd ever hired. They had two sons together, Timothy born in 1990 and Alexander born in 1994, both born in Toronto. The children grew up believing they were Canadian. They spoke no Russian. They knew nothing of their parents' true identities. Juan Lazaro and Vicky Pelayas in Yonkers, New York. Lazaro's real name was Mikhail Anatolievich Vasenkov. He was a Russian citizen who stole the identity of a dead Uruguayan child. The real Juan Lazaro died of respiratory failure in 1947 in Uruguay at age 3. Vasenkov used the dead toddler's birth certificate to build his false identity. He flew from Madrid to Lima on March 13, 1976, on a Uruguayan passport in the name of Juan José Lazaro Fuentes. His wife, Vicky Pelayas, was different. She was a Peruvian national who became a naturalized U.S. citizen. She worked as a columnist for the Spanish-language daily El Diario in New York. She was not born in Russia and was not a trained SVR officer. She was recruited by Vasenkov after their relationship began. They had a son together. Pelayas also had a son from a previous marriage. The FBI couldn't determine whether she fully understood she was involved in espionage operations or whether she believed she was simply helping her husband with his legitimate work. Michael Zatoli and Patricia Mills in Arlington, Virginia. Their real names were Mikhail Kutzik and Natalia Pereverzeva. They had operated for a long time in the state of Washington before relocating to suburban Washington, D.C. They had two children together, ages 1 and 3, at the time of their arrests. The couple received specially coded radio transmissions at their high-rise apartment. During one FBI search of their residence, agents found random numbers used to decode the radiograms. In 2004, Kutzik received money from Vladimir Guryev at Columbus Circle in New York, while Pereverzeva stood lookout. In 2009, Kutzik evidently received $150,000 in cash and a flash drive from Guryev during another New York meeting. When the computer program supplied to him didn't function properly, Kutzik communicated with the SVR using a laptop that Guryev brought directly from Moscow. Then there were two agents operating alone. Mikhail Semenko lived in Arlington, Virginia. He was first identified by the FBI when he used a computer in a restaurant to send encrypted messages. The FBI tracked the wireless signals. They discovered Semenko was communicating with a car parked in the restaurant parking lot. The car had Russian diplomatic plates. The car was driven by a Russian official known to have transferred money to other Russian sleeper agents in 2004. Semenko's communications were brief but frequent. He worked as an entry-level employee, but his lifestyle didn't match his salary. The FBI began full surveillance. And then there was Anna Chapman. Born Anna Vasilyevna Kushenko on February 23, 1982. She was the only member of the network who became a household name. Her father, Vasily Kushenko, was a senior KGB official who once served as Russian ambassador to Kenya. In 2010, he occupied a senior position at the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Anna grew up in Volgograd with access to elite schools. She mastered multiple languages. She excelled in mathematics and economics. She met Alex Chapman at a London Docklands rave party in 2001. They married shortly thereafter in Moscow. Through the marriage, Anna gained British citizenship and a British passport. She moved to London, where she worked at NetJets and Barclays. She divorced Alex Chapman in 2006. By 2009, Anna Chapman had moved to New York City. She operated an online real estate business. She was young, beautiful, and photogenic. She moved easily through Manhattan social circles. She was believed to have been recruited by the SVR around 2000. For nearly a decade, she operated successfully without detection. How did they communicate with Moscow? The methods were straight out of Cold War spy novels, but updated with modern technology. They used invisible ink for brief messages. They used radiograms, coded radio transmissions broadcast from Russia that could be received anywhere with the right equipment. They used steganography, a sophisticated system that encrypted messages and concealed them in ordinary digital photographs. The FBI discovered that by entering a 27-character code into the spies' computers, they could access a special steganography program. The spies would download seemingly innocent images from specific websites. Hidden within the pixels of those images were encrypted instructions from Moscow Center. In 2006, during one search of the Cambridge residence of Heathfield and Foley, law enforcement found traces of deleted electronic messages on computer disks. These were drafts of intelligence reports that had been sent to Moscow headquarters using steganography. One decrypted message spelled out the mission clearly: search and develop ties in policymaking circles in U.S. and send intelligence reports. They also used dead drops, physical locations where money or information could be left and retrieved. The Wurtsboro dead? Drop was just one of many. They met with Russian officials in public places, coffee shops, subway stations, train platforms, parks. The FBI documented dozens of such meetings over the years. Anna Chapman became particularly reckless. In January 2010, she used her laptop at a coffee shop on 47th Street in Manhattan to electronically transfer data to a Russian official driving by outside. 2 months later, in March, Chapman used a private Wi-Fi network, possibly at a Barnes & Noble store on Greenwich Street, to communicate with the same Russian official who was parked nearby. She used a range extender for her laptop to boost the signal. The FBI watched it all happen in real time. They photographed the meetings, they recorded the wireless signals, they documented every detail. Chapman's confidence was growing. She believed she was invisible. She had no idea federal agents had been tracking her activities for months. Moscow Center sent regular instructions to the operatives. One message intercepted by the FBI and later entered into court documents laid out the mission with brutal clarity. You were sent to USA for long-term service trip. Your education, bank accounts, car, house, etc., all these serve one goal: fulfill your main mission, i.e. to search and develop ties in policymaking circles in U.S. and send intels. Another message was more specific about the type of intelligence Moscow wanted: information about U.S. policy in Central America, problems with American military policy, U.S. policy regarding the use of the Internet by terrorists, and estimates of Russian foreign policy from Western perspectives. The SVR was playing a long game. These weren't agents sent to steal specific classified documents. They were sent to become part of American society so deeply that eventually, over years or decades, they would have access to people who held real power. They were engaged in what intelligence professionals call spotting and assessing. They identified colleagues, friends, and acquaintances who might someday hold positions of influence. They built relationships slowly. They gained trust gradually. Perhaps years down the line, those relationships could be exploited for intelligence purposes. The FBI understood this strategy because history provided a clear example. In the 1930s, Soviet intelligence talent spotters recruited Cambridge University students in England. Those students, including the infamous Kim Philby, later rose to positions of power in the British government and became some of the Soviet Union's most valuable spies. The Cambridge Five compromised British intelligence for decades. The SVR was attempting to replicate that success in America. They were willing to wait decades. They had spent significant funds training these operatives. They had created false identities that could withstand scrutiny. They had established cover stories that were nearly perfect. Moscow Center reimbursed the spies for everything: rent, utilities, cars, insurance, gas, meals, even gifts for their children. The Russian government spent millions supporting this operation. The FBI documented every dollar that flowed into the network. The financial trail was extensive and damning. But the FBI also understood something else. These agents had not yet succeeded in their ultimate objective. They had made contacts with interesting people. They had developed relationships with individuals in finance, academia, and business. But they had not penetrated U.S. government circles. They had not gained access to classified information. They had not recruited any Americans to work for Russian intelligence. An unnamed FBI agent later acknowledged this reality. Although they didn't achieve that objective, the agent said, without us there to stop them, given enough time, they would have eventually become successful. The question facing FBI leadership became, when do we act? Every day the investigation continued, more evidence accumulated, more contacts were documented, more meetings were photographed. But every day also brought the risk that one of the agents might disappear, or that Moscow might discover the FBI surveillance and pull the entire network, or that an agent might finally recruit someone with access to real secrets. The decision required coordination across multiple agencies. The FBI's counterintelligence division took the lead, but the CIA provided intelligence about Russian operations overseas. The Justice Department prepared legal documents. The State Department considered diplomatic implications. The White House monitored developments and would ultimately need to approve any arrests. Throughout 2009 and into 2010, the surveillance continued. Thousands of hours of audio recordings, hundreds of videos, reams of financial documents, intercepts of electronic communications. The investigation file grew massive. Then, in early 2010, the Bureau noticed something troubling. Some of the agents were making preparations to leave the United States. Donald Heathfield had purchased airline tickets to depart from Boston's Logan Airport with one of his sons on June 27th. He planned to take a European vacation. Vladimir Guryev was planning to travel to France and possibly Russia. The FBI analysts worried. If these agents left the country, bringing them back for prosecution would become infinitely more complicated. Russia would never extradite them. The evidence would remain locked in FBI files. Justice would never be served, and Moscow could simply activate other sleeper agents the FBI hadn't yet identified. Then something happened that made the decision urgent. Anna Chapman made a critical mistake. On June 26, 2010, Chapman met with an undercover FBI agent in a New York coffee shop. The FBI agent posed as a Russian intelligence officer. He wore a wire that recorded the entire conversation. The undercover agent asked Chapman to deliver a fake passport to another operative. He explained the passport was for someone here like you, but not in true name, meaning another illegal without diplomatic cover. Chapman agreed to the task. "Are you ready for this step?" the undercover agent asked. Chapman replied, "Of course." She accepted the passport. She held it in her hands, physical evidence of conspiracy. Then Chapman did something unexpected. She called her father in Moscow. Vasily Kushenko was still a senior official in Russian intelligence. She told him she suspected she had been discovered. She said she planned to leave for Moscow in mid-July. Her father told her to hand the passport to police immediately. Make it look innocent. She followed his advice. She turned the fake passport over to authorities, apparently trying to appear cooperative. But it was too late. The FBI now had Chapman on tape agreeing to deliver a fraudulent document to a foreign agent. On June 26th, FBI agent Amit Kachia-Patel submitted a sealed complaint to Magistrate Judge Ronald L. Ellis alleging violation of Title 18, United States Code Section 951, conspiracy to act as unregistered agents of a foreign government. Arrest warrants were issued for Anna Chapman and Mikhail Semenko. FBI leadership convened an emergency meeting. The window for arrests was closing rapidly. Several of the spies planned to travel outside the United States within days. Chapman was spooked and planning to flee. Moscow might recall the entire network at any moment. Todd Shelton, one of the lead FBI agents on the case, later described the pressure. "It was the request of the administration that we delay our arrest until the U.S. president was back in the United States and the Russian president was away from North American airspace." President Barack Obama and Russian President Dmitry Medvedev were both attending international summits in Canada that final week of June. The diplomatic complications of arresting Russian spies while both presidents were in the same country seemed unwise. The administration asked the FBI to wait. The Bureau agreed, but only if all targets remained in the United States. If anyone boarded a plane, the arrest would happen immediately, regardless of diplomatic concerns. Alan Kohler, who later became assistant director of the FBI's counterintelligence division, described those final days. The summer of 2010, specifically that last week in June, was really going to be the only time that we anticipated having all the spies in the country together. The FBI had been planning for this moment for years. Hundreds of agents across multiple field offices received their assignments. Tactical teams prepared for synchronized raids. Surveillance units maintained 24/7 coverage. Technical specialists ensured all electronic monitoring equipment functioned perfectly. Local police departments in Montclair, Cambridge, Yonkers, and Arlington were notified but given only minimal information to prevent leaks. United States Marshals prepared transportation. Federal prosecutors finalized charges and plea agreements. Everyone waited for the green light. Finally, on Saturday night, June 26th, the presidents departed Canada. Obama returned to the United States. Medvedev flew back to Russia. The diplomatic window opened. FBI Director Robert Mueller gave the authorization. Execute all arrest warrants simultaneously at 0600 hours Sunday, June 27th. Sunday morning arrived hot and humid. Ed Foley positioned himself near the Murphy House in Montclair. Maria Ricci and her team surrounded the Cambridge townhouse where Heathfield and Foley lived. Agents in Yonkers covered the residence of Lazaro and Pelaez. Arlington teams prepared to take down Zotoli and Mills. Manhattan surveillance tracked Semenko. New York agents knew Chapman's location. Everything hinged on precise coordination. One arrest had to trigger all the others within minutes. If any agent escaped or destroyed evidence, the case could be compromised. At exactly 0600 hours, the radio call went out. All units execute. Simultaneous raids began across 4 states. Federal agents wearing tactical gear and FBI vests moved quickly toward their targets. The knock came at every door at the same moment. Federal Bureau of Investigation, you are under arrest. In Montclair, Vladimir and Lydia Guryev stood on their porch in shock. Their neighbors poured into the street. Stanley Skolnick, who lived nearby, later remembered, crowds were gathering. There were cars parked everywhere. FBI, police. Nobody could possibly have understood that there was, going on in this neighborhood, a spy ring. Elizabeth Lapine, a poetry professor who lived down the street, said she thought there had been a murder when she saw agents arrive at dawn. You could have told me they were Martians from space, and I would have been less surprised. In Cambridge, agents arrested Andrei Bezrikov and Elena Vavilova at their townhouse on Trowbridge Street. Their sons Timothy, age 20, and Alexander, age 16, watched in confusion as their parents were handcuffed. Lila Hexner, an 85-year-old neighbor who had known the couple in passing for 3 years, told reporters, "There are a lot of things I just accepted and made up reasons for in my head." She had wondered why the couple never attended community meetings or neighborhood potlucks. She had noticed Ann Foley seemed European but couldn't place the accent. Now everything made sense. Alex Kuhn, who managed the real estate company where Tracy Foley worked, received a phone call at 9:30 that night. "Do you know that Tracy Ann Foley, who works for you, was just arrested for being a Russian spy?" Kuhn thought it was a prank. "She was probably one of the hardest working and most competent agents that I had," he later said, still struggling to process the news. Yonkers, FBI agents took Mikhail Vasenkov and Vicky Pelaez into custody. Pelaez's 2 sons were present during the arrest. The children appeared confused and frightened. In Arlington, agents arrested Mikhail Kutzik and Natalia Pereverzeva at their high-rise apartment. Their children, aged 1 and 3, were taken into protective custody. Anna Chapman was arrested in Manhattan. Mikhail Semenko was taken into custody in Arlington, Virginia. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, FBI agents knocked on Heathfield's door at approximately 11 p.m., just before he was scheduled to leave for the airport with his son. The timing was critical. Another hour, and he would have been beyond reach. By midnight on June 27th, 10 Russian intelligence officers were in federal custody. They were transported to federal detention facilities in their respective cities. They were photographed, fingerprinted, processed. Their real identities were unknown even to the FBI at first. They continued using their false names during initial questioning, but within days, the truth would emerge. The arrests made international headlines within hours. WBZ Boston reported, "A husband and wife from Cambridge are in federal custody tonight. They're accused of being Russian spies." CBS Evening News anchor Erica Hill announced, "Tonight we're learning of 10 arrests here in the U.S. The suspects accused of being secret agents for Russia." The story had everything: Cold War intrigue, false identities, suburban families living double lives, and Anna Chapman, whose glamorous photos from social media made her an instant tabloid sensation. The media dubbed her a femme fatale and Russian Bond girl. Foreign governments expressed shock. Britain immediately revoked Anna Chapman's UK citizenship. Canada began investigating how Russian intelligence obtained the identities of dead Canadian children. Peru demanded information about Vicky Pelaez, one of their citizens arrested in the operation. But the most important reactions came from Moscow and Washington. Russian officials initially denied the allegations. Foreign ministry spokesmen called the arrests unfounded. Russian media suggested the timing was designed to damage improving U.S.-Russia relations. Moscow claimed the arrests were politically motivated. Within 48 hours, however, a different message emerged from the Kremlin. Russian diplomats approached their American counterparts with a proposal: a prisoner exchange. Russia would release 4 individuals imprisoned for allegedly spying for Western intelligence agencies. In return, the United States would deport the 10 arrested Russian agents. The White House convened crisis meetings. CIA Director Leon Panetta provided intelligence assessments. Attorney General Eric Holder reviewed legal options. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton considered diplomatic ramifications. On June 30th, the State Department issued a statement the United States would not expel Russian diplomats. Over the incident, Washington expressed no public indignation that Russia had been caught running an espionage network on American soil. The message was clear. The administration wanted to handle this quietly and pragmatically. On July 7, 2010, negotiators from both countries reached final agreement. The 10 Russian agents would plead guilty to conspiracy to act as unregistered agents of a foreign government. They would be immediately deported to Russia. In exchange, Russia would pardon and release 4 prisoners. The exchange would take place in Vienna, Austria, on July 9th. The location was symbolic. Vienna had been a crossroads of Cold War espionage for decades. The swap would happen on the tarmac at Vienna International Airport. No agents would officially enter Austria. No extradition paperwork would be required. The whole operation would be completed in less than 90 minutes. Thursday, July 8, 2010. Federal courtrooms in Manhattan became the stage for a historic legal proceeding. The 10 defendants were brought before Judge Kimba M. Wood in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. They entered their pleas one by one. Each was asked to provide their true identity. Vladimir and Lydia Guriev admitted they were Russian citizens using the false names Richard and Cynthia Murphy. Andrei Bezrukov and Elena Vavilova admitted they were Russian citizens using the names Donald Heathfield and Tracy Foley. Mikhail Vasenkov admitted he was a Russian citizen using the name Juan Lazaro. Vicky Pelaez admitted she was an agent of the Russian Federation. Anna Chapman admitted she was an agent of the Russian Federation. Mikhail Semenko admitted he was an agent of the Russian Federation. Mikhail Kutsik admitted he was a Russian citizen using the name Michael Zottoli. Natalia Pereverzeva admitted she was a Russian citizen using the name Patricia Mills. Each defendant pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to act as an agent of a foreign government within the United States without notifying the U.S. Attorney General. Under their plea agreements, they were required to disclose their true identities and forfeit assets attributable to their crimes. All agreed never to return to the United States without permission. The house at 31 Marquette Road in Montclair was seized by the U.S. Marshals Service. Bank accounts were frozen. Vehicles were impounded. Anna Chapman, wearing handcuffs and a green prison smock, stood before the judge. Her red hair was pulled back. She glanced around the courtroom, perhaps looking for sympathetic faces. She found none. Chapman's attorney, Robert Baum, argued that his client committed no crime by simply communicating with members of a foreign government. He called the government's evidence innocuous. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Farbiars countered forcefully. He told Judge Wood that Chapman was an extraordinary agent for Russia who had communicated with Russian government officials through specially created wireless networks. The evidence was overwhelming. Chapman's own voice on FBI recordings agreeing to deliver false documents. Chapman pleaded guilty. The proceedings lasted less than 3 hours. By late afternoon, all 10 defendants had formally admitted their guilt. They were returned to custody to await deportation. Friday, July 9, 2010. Dawn broke over Vienna International Airport. 2 aircraft prepared for departure from different locations. A Boeing 767 chartered by Vision Airlines departed from LaGuardia Airport in New York carrying the 10 Russian agents. The plane refueled in Bangor, Maine before continuing across the Atlantic. A Russian government Yakovlev Yak-42 departed from Moscow carrying 4 passengers. Igor Sutyagin, a 45-year-old arms control researcher who had been serving a 14-year sentence for allegedly spying for the United States. Sutyagin had told relatives he was reluctant to leave Russia. He said he signed a confession and agreed to the swap only because he feared his refusal would ruin everyone else's chances. He also feared the remaining 3 years of his sentence in harsh prison conditions. Alexander Zaporozhsky, a former colonel in the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. He had been sentenced in 2003 to 18 years for secret cooperation with the United States. He may have been one of the sources who exposed Robert Hanssen and Aldrich Ames, two of the most damaging spies ever caught in America. Zaporozhsky had served 7 years. Sergei Skripal, a former colonel in Russian military intelligence, the GRU, he had been convicted of high treason in 2006 and sentenced to 13 years. Russian prosecutors accused him of revealing the identities of dozens of Russian agents operating in Europe to British intelligence MI6. He had been recruited by the British around 1995 while stationed in Spain. For years he passed Russian state secrets to London. After his arrest in December 2004, he spent more than 5 years in a Russian prison. Gennady Vasilenko, a former KGB officer. He was the only prisoner in the exchange not convicted on espionage charges. He had been sentenced in 2006 to 3 years for illegal weapons possession and resistance to authorities. The CIA specifically requested his inclusion in the swap. The two aircraft arrived at Vienna International Airport within minutes of each other around noon local time. They parked nose to tail on a remote section of tarmac far from passenger terminals. Covered aircraft stairs were brought to both planes. The Austrian government provided security but kept their distance. This was a carefully choreographed operation between two sovereign nations. No Austrian officials would be involved beyond providing the location. A small bus drove between the two aircraft. The 10 Russian agents exited the American plane. They walked down the stairs and across the tarmac. They boarded the bus. The 4 Russian prisoners emerged from the Russian plane. They walked down the stairs and across the tarmac. They boarded the bus. The exchange happened in complete silence. No words were spoken between the two groups as they passed each other. The bus made 2 trips between the planes. The whole operation lasted less than 90 minutes. Photographers with telephoto lenses documented the scene from a distance. The images showed figures walking across concrete, small silhouettes against the massive aircraft. History unfolding in real time. Then it was over. The American plane carrying the 4 freed prisoners departed Vienna. It stopped at RAF Brize Norton in Oxfordshire, England, to drop off Sergei Skripal and Igor Sutyagin. Then it continued to Washington Dulles International Airport, where Alexander Zaporozhsky and Gennady Vasilenko disembarked. The Russian plane carrying the 10 spies returned to Moscow's Domodedovo Airport. Upon landing, the agents were immediately taken to a secure facility. Russian authorities kept them away from media. They underwent extensive debriefing. Russian intelligence wanted to understand how the FBI had discovered them. They suspected a betrayal. Someone within Russian intelligence must have provided information to the Americans. In Moscow, speculation focused on Colonel Alexander Patayev, deputy head of the American department within Directorate S of the SVR. Directorate S oversees illegals operations. Patayev had disappeared shortly before the arrests. A Russian military court later identified Patayev as the defector who betrayed Operation Ghost Stories. In absentia, Russia convicted him of treason and sentenced him to 25 years. He has never been seen publicly since. In July 2010, Anna Chapman called her father from American custody. During a later Russian court proceeding, she testified that only Patayev could have provided the information that led to her arrest. She alleged the undercover FBI agent who approached her used a code that only Patayev and her personal handler would have known. Whether Patayev acted alone or whether other sources contributed to exposing the network remains classified. The aftermath rippled across multiple countries and decades. The children of the spies faced impossible choices. Kate and Lisa Murphy, daughters of Vladimir and Lydia Guryev, were American citizens by birth. They were 11 and 9 years old. They had grown up in Montclair, New Jersey. They attended American schools. They had American friends. They spoke only English. Suddenly their parents were revealed as Russian spies. The girls were sent to Russia with their parents. Attorney General Eric Holder told CBS Face the Nation that all children of the Russian agents were repatriated. The girls reportedly still have the right to return to the United States if they choose. Whether they ever will remains unknown. Timothy and Alexander Vavilov, sons of Andrei Bezrukov and Elena Vavilova, were born in Canada. They considered themselves Canadian. They spoke no Russian. Timothy was 20 years old. Alexander was 16. They watched their parents plead guilty to espionage. They learned their entire lives had been based on lies. Their parents' names were not real. Their family history was fabricated. Their childhood was cover for a spy operation. Canadian officials immediately revoked the boys' citizenship. Canada determined their citizenship was obtained by fraud because their parents had used false identities when registering the births. The boys sued the Canadian government. They argued they were innocent victims. They had no knowledge of their parents' activities. They were children when brought to Canada. In June 2023, after 13 years of legal battles, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled in favor of the brothers. The court found that children should not be held responsible for their parents' deception. The boys were granted Canadian citizenship once again, but the damage was permanent. They spent their formative years discovering that everything they believed about themselves was false. Anna Chapman became a celebrity in Russia upon her return. She appeared on magazine covers. She hosted a television program. She modeled for fashion brands. In 2011, she became a member of the youth wing of Russia's ruling United Russia Party. She gave speeches about patriotism and loyalty. She described her time in American custody as an ordeal. She said she never broke under interrogation. She portrayed herself as a hero. Western intelligence analysts viewed her differently. They considered her a low-level operative whose celebrity status was propaganda. Her social media presence had made her sloppy. Her communication security was poor. She had ignored basic tradecraft. Her arrest helped expose the entire network. Some in Russian intelligence reportedly viewed her as a liability rather than an asset. Andrei Bezrukov, the Harvard-educated spy who used the name Donald Heathfield, returned to academic life in Russia. He became a professor and lecturer. He gave interviews discussing his experiences. In 2012, he appeared on Russian television and calmly explained his double life. He said he felt no remorse. He served his country. He did his duty. When asked about his sons, he became emotional. That was the price of service, he said. He acknowledged the pain his choices caused his children, but he stood by his decision to serve Russian intelligence. Elena Vavilova became a successful entrepreneur in Russia. She launched a fashion business. She rarely discusses her time in America. Vladimir and Lydia Guryev disappeared from public view. They continue living in Russia but avoid media attention. Their daughters remain out of the public eye. Mikhail Vasenkov died in Russia in 2013. He was 66 years old. His wife Vicky Pelayas had returned to Russia with him after the swap, despite being Peruvian. She later moved back to Peru. In 2015, she told reporters she never fully understood the extent of her husband's espionage activities. She claimed she thought he was doing legitimate work for the Russian government. Whether that claim is credible remains debatable. Federal prosecutors believe she actively participated in the conspiracy. Her guilty plea suggests she knew enough to face criminal charges. The truth likely lies somewhere between innocent spouse and active participant. Mikhail Kutsik and Natalia Pereverzeva received Russian state decorations for their service. They were honored in a Kremlin ceremony. President Dmitry Medvedev personally presented them with medals. He praised their dedication and sacrifice. Their children were raised in Russia. Whether they maintained contact with anyone from their American lives is unknown. Mikhail Semenko returned to Moscow and rejoined Russian intelligence work. He later became a government official. In October 2023, Semenko was killed in a shooting outside a sports complex in Korolev, Russia. The circumstances remain unclear. Russian authorities called it a domestic dispute. Western intelligence analysts speculated it might have been connected to internal Russian intelligence conflicts. No one was charged with his murder. The 4 prisoners released by Russia faced their own challenges integrating back into Western society. Sergei Skripal settled in Salisbury, England. British intelligence provided him with a home and a pension. He lived quietly for 8 years. Then on March 4, 2018, Skripal and his daughter Yulia were found unconscious on a park bench in Salisbury city center. British investigators determined they had been poisoned with Novichok, a Soviet-developed nerve agent. They nearly died. The attack was traced to two Russian intelligence officers who traveled to England specifically to kill Skripal. British Prime Minister Theresa May called it an attempted murder directed by the Russian state. Skripal survived the attack but remains in protective custody. His location is secret. His daughter Yulia recovered and returned to Russia despite British warnings. In September 2018, a British woman named Dawn Sturgis died after being exposed to Novichok residue from the same batch used against Skripal. She found a discarded perfume bottle containing the nerve agent. The poison killed her. The Skripal poisoning became an international incident. Western nations expelled hundreds of Russian diplomats. Russia denied involvement despite overwhelming evidence. The message from Moscow was clear. Traitors will be hunted. Even prisoners who were traded in good faith, even those who were pardoned as part of diplomatic agreements. The assassination attempt demonstrated that Russia considered the spy swap of 2010 incomplete. They got their agents back, but they never forgave those who betrayed them. Igor Suchigin settled in England. He worked as a researcher. He continued studying international relations and arms control. He gave occasional interviews about his imprisonment and the spy swap. He described his years in Russian custody as brutal. He maintained he was innocent of espionage charges. He said his only crime was being an academic who corresponded with Western colleagues. Whether that claim is accurate remains contested. Alexander Zaporozhsky received a new identity and relocated to an undisclosed location in the United States. CIA provided financial support. He lived under protection for years. In April 2021, Russian media reported Zaporozhsky had returned to Russia. The reports claimed he missed his homeland and wanted to be with family in his final years. Western intelligence officials expressed skepticism about whether his return was voluntary. Some speculated Russian intelligence may have coerced him through threats against family members. His current status is unknown. Gennady Vasilenko remained in the United States. He maintained contact with former CIA colleagues. He lived quietly until his death in December 2021 at age 78. The diplomatic relationship between Washington and Moscow continued its complicated trajectory. The spy swap was supposed to clear the air. Both sides claimed it demonstrated mature conflict management, but beneath the surface, the espionage war never stopped. In 2013, Russia granted asylum to Edward Snowden, the former NSA contractor who leaked classified documents revealing American surveillance programs. In 2016, U.S. intelligence concluded Russia interfered in the American presidential election. In 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. The United States provided billions in military aid to Ukraine. Relations deteriorated to their lowest point since the Cold War ended. And throughout all of this, intelligence operations continued. In October 2022, the FBI arrested Sergei Vladimirovich Cherkasov in Brazil. He was a Russian intelligence officer living under deep cover using a false Brazilian identity. He had been studying at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in Washington. His cover story claimed he was Victor Moller Ferreira, born in Brazil. The FBI investigation revealed he was a Russian illegal, part of a program that continued long after Operation Ghost Stories. Other Russian illegals have been quietly arrested in various countries over the past decade. Their cases don't make headlines. Most are handled through diplomatic channels and quiet deportations. So what did Operation Ghost Stories accomplish? From the FBI's perspective, it was a massive counterintelligence success. 10 trained Russian intelligence. Officers were identified, surveilled, and neutralized. Their networks were mapped. Their contacts were documented. Anyone who had met with them became part of the FBI's awareness. The message to Moscow was clear. We see you. We can penetrate your operations. We will catch your agents. From Moscow's perspective, it was a setback, but not a catastrophe. The illegals never accessed truly classified information. They never recruited Americans to betray their country. The damage was limited. All 10 agents were recovered through the swap. They returned home as heroes. They received state honors. Their families were provided for. The program could continue with new operatives using improved security protocols. From a broader intelligence perspective, the operation revealed the enduring nature of espionage. The Cold War supposedly ended in 1991. The Soviet Union collapsed. Russia became a democracy, at least in name. Economic cooperation increased. Cultural exchanges flourished. Presidents spoke of partnership and common interest, and all the while, Russian intelligence ran sophisticated operations on American soil. Sleeper agents lived among ordinary Americans for decades. The illegals program that deployed them started in the Soviet era and continued seamlessly into the post-Soviet Russian Federation. The institutional commitment to espionage transcended political systems and rhetoric about improved relations. The operation also exposed vulnerabilities in Western security. How did Russian intelligence obtain the identities of dead children in Canada? Those identities became the foundation for new lives. Birth certificates were obtained, passports were issued, bank accounts were opened, mortgages were approved, all based on stolen identities of babies who died decades earlier. The system had no effective way to prevent such identity theft. How did Russian intelligence officers maintain cover for decades while raising children and working real jobs? They attended parent-teacher conferences. They filed tax returns. They participated in neighborhood associations. And no one suspected anything until the FBI made arrests. The Cambridge neighbors said they seemed odd, but not suspicious. The Montclair neighbors said they were quiet, but friendly. Normal American life provided perfect camouflage. The children of the spies remained the most tragic victims. They committed no crimes. They participated in no conspiracy. They were born into espionage operations without their knowledge or consent. Their parents made choices that destroyed their children's lives. Kate and Lisa Murphy were uprooted from America and sent to Russia, a country they had never known. Timothy and Alexander Vavilov spent 13 years fighting to reclaim citizenship in the only country they had ever known. The psychological trauma of discovering your entire life was constructed as cover for a spy operation is difficult to comprehend. Every childhood memory becomes tainted. Every family story revealed as fabrication. Your parents are strangers. Your home country is foreign. Your name might not even be real. Some children of illegals have spoken anonymously to journalists. They describe feeling betrayed by parents they loved. They describe struggling to rebuild identities after learning everything they believed was false. They describe anger, confusion, and profound loss. Mental health professionals who work with such individuals say the psychological damage can last a lifetime. And what about the inspiration for popular culture? Operation Ghost Stories directly inspired the FX television series The Americans, which premiered in January 2013. The show followed two Soviet KGB officers posing as an American married couple living in suburban Washington during the 1980s. The series creators Joe Weisberg and Joel Fields explicitly cited Operation Ghost Stories as their starting point. Weisberg himself was a former CIA officer who worked on Soviet counterintelligence. He understood the real-world dynamics of illegal operations. The Americans ran for 6 seasons and 75 episodes. It earned critical acclaim and multiple Emmy nominations. It explored the moral complexity of espionage, the cost of living double lives, and the impact on children raised by spies. Many plot points directly paralleled Operation Ghost Stories. The show depicted parents struggling to maintain cover while raising children. It showed the tension between patriotic duty and family loyalty. It portrayed the slow accumulation of intelligence over years rather than dramatic heists of secrets. Critics praised the show for its realistic depiction of espionage tradecraft. Intelligence professionals said the series captured the mundane reality of spy work more accurately than typical Hollywood productions. The show's finale aired in May 2018. By then, viewers understood they had been watching a fictionalized version of real events. The spies in Operation Ghost Stories didn't operate in the 1980s. They operated in the 2000s. They used modern technology, but the fundamental dynamics remained identical. The FBI case files from Operation Ghost Stories filled entire rooms. Thousands of surveillance logs, hundreds of audio recordings, dozens of intercepted communications, photographs of meetings, copies of financial records, technical analysis of steganography programs, witness statements from neighbors, colleagues, and acquaintances. The investigation cost millions of dollars and required thousands of work hours from hundreds of agents. The evidence was so overwhelming that all 10 defendants immediately pleaded guilty rather than face trial. No defense attorney believed they could win. The recorded conversations alone would have convicted them. The financial records provided ironclad proof of payments from Russian intelligence. The radiograms and steganographic messages documented ongoing communications with Moscow Center. The witness testimony from the undercover FBI agent who met with Anna Chapman sealed her fate. The physical evidence collected from homes during arrests included computers containing encrypted messages, radio equipment for receiving transmissions from Russia, code books for decrypting radiograms, and cash in amounts that couldn't be explained by legitimate income. But perhaps the most important aspect of Operation Ghost Stories is what it revealed about the continuing nature of great power competition. In 2010, many Americans believed the age of spy versus spy confrontation had ended. The Cold War was over. Russia was no longer an ideological enemy. The threats came from terrorism, not espionage. Operation Ghost Stories shattered that comfortable assumption. It demonstrated that Russian intelligence never stopped targeting America. The methods evolved, the technology improved, but the mission remained constant: penetrate American society, cultivate sources, steal secrets, undermine American interests. The illegals arrested in Operation Ghost Stories were part of a program that started during the Soviet era and continued into Putin's Russia. Some of the agents had been in place since the mid-1990s. They spent 15 years building cover stories before the FBI arrested them. Moscow's patience and commitment to long-term operations impressed even experienced American counterintelligence professionals. Russian intelligence was willing to invest decades in developing sources who might never produce a single piece of classified information. They understood that building relationships with people on the periphery of power could eventually lead to access at the center of power. They were playing a game measured in generations, not months or years. Today, counterintelligence professionals know that Russian illegals continue operating in America and allied nations. The Ghost Stories arrests didn't end the program. It forced adaptations, better training, improved communication security, more sophisticated identity construction. But the fundamental strategy endures. Russian intelligence still sends officers to live under deep cover in Western countries. They still build false identities. They still raise families as camouflage. They still cultivate relationships with people in business, academia, and government. The FBI and allied intelligence services watch for them. Surveillance continues. Investigations proceed quietly. When a new illegal is identified, the same calculation happens. Do we arrest immediately or do we watch and learn? Most of the time, authorities watch. They map the network. They identify contacts. They document communications. They wait until the intelligence value of surveillance is exceeded by the risk of losing the target. Then they strike. The cycle repeats. So if you found this documentary interesting, if you want to learn more about the hidden world of espionage, if you're fascinated by the true stories of spies living among us, then please subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss future videos. We cover Cold War history, espionage operations, counterintelligence successes and failures, and the ongoing competition between intelligence services that continues today. Leave a comment telling me which spy story you want covered next. The Cambridge Five, the Rosenbergs, Aldrich Ames, Robert Hansen, Oleg Penkovsky. Or maybe a more recent case like Maria Butina or the Chinese espionage operations targeting American technology companies. The real world of espionage is more fascinating than any Hollywood movie. The stakes are higher, the consequences are more severe, and the stories are true. These operations actually happened. These people actually existed. The houses in Montclair and Cambridge were real. The children caught in the middle were real. The FBI agents who spent years watching and waiting were real. And somewhere right now, another Russian illegal is living under deep cover in an American suburb, raising children who don't know the truth, working a real job as camouflage, building relationships that Moscow hopes will pay dividends decades from now. The game never ends. The players change, but the rules remain the same. Welcome to the real world of espionage. Subscribe now to learn more.